Hello everybody! Welcome to the most anticipated video there is in Teamfight Tactics, which is Amaz's unit analysis guide. That's me. I am Amaz, and here in this video we're going to analyze each champion in Teamfight Tactics based on their statistics. I'm going to let you know which ones are the best, which units you want to pick, and which units you don't want to avoid for now, because we've heard that in devs they're going to update some units, they're going to make balance changes, but for now this is going to be the most accurate, and it also gets you a very good insight if you're a new player or if you are coming from auto chess, which units you kind of want to use and try out. Before we start, I'm going to give a quick shout out to my stream. You should tune into my stream at 6 a.m. Pacific time every weekday. This is my new streaming time. I stream Teamfight Tactics a lot now. So if you want to see me live in action and ask me a few questions that are more personal or whatnot, then make sure you do that there. And of course, I always am looking at the YouTube comment section on the channel. So hopefully you let me know what you think. Anyways, we're gonna go ahead and rate every champion based on 3 statistics, okay? First statistic, most importantly, is actually damage. How much damage output can this champion do? It includes their auto attacks, it includes their abilities, it also includes any synergies or class tribal stuff they have. So for example, a ranger would do better in terms of damage rather than, say, a knight, which has more of a defensive mechanic. And because of the defensive mechanic, we need another, value to assign to for tankiness, and that is survival. All right, survival is how much damage a unit can take before they die. If it's a squishy unit, it probably has a low survival rating. And if it's a very, very high survival rating, then maybe it can protect other people as well. And finally, very important stats in each of these champions is their utility. What can they do to basically affect the fight and swing it in your favor? So for example, do they have slowing abilities? Do they have stuns? Do they buff your other units and make them stronger? Do they heal your units? All these added together makes it so that your team is more utility and can face a wide array of situations rather than just doing damage and taking damage. So we're gonna rate each of these values, damage, survival, and utility, out of 5. So a unit can have anywhere between 1 and 5 stars based on how well they perform in each of these areas. After that, I'm going to rate each unit as a ranking. There's S tier units, there's also A, B, C, and going down and so on, all right? So yeah, let's go ahead and dive right into 1 cost units, and I'm gonna organize these alphabetically so it's easier to search. First unit we have is Darius. Darius is a 1 cost Imperial and Knight unit. He has pretty good health, and he does pretty good damage based on his auto attack. And his ability is Decimate, where he spins around in a little circle after charging up a little bit. And not only does it deal damage to everything that's surrounding him, he also heals based on how many units he strikes. So this ability is quite effective in area effect and dealing damage to multiple enemies at once, and also gives him a little bit survivability. The combination of his auto attacks and his tankiness along with his ability makes it so that his damage is at a 2 and his survival is at a 3. Darius is a very good frontline unit that's really cheap to pick up. He doesn't have too much utility though. He only heals himself, and he does a little bit of area effect damage, so his utility is a 2. But overall, he's a very solid unit that you should be able to pick up quite well, and he'll actually perform for you quite well in the early game. So he gets a B from me. All right, next up we have Fiora. Fiora is a noble blade master, and her ability is Riposte, where she channels a counter hit and then deals damage and stuns after the channeling is over. The damage on Riposte is not that high. And during her channeling time, she doesn't take any damage or get affected by anything. She basically just is immune to all damage and all spells, which is kind of interesting. And then once the stun happens, she becomes normal again, and she basically attacks again. Now, unfortunately, Fiora is really, really bad because she has one of the lowest health pools in the game. She starts at 400 health, which is actually kind of super low in terms of every other champion in the roster. And also, since her ability only affects one unit, it's actually not very important. It doesn't really do that much. So her damage is very low. She's at 1 in damage. And, you know, her survival is fine because when she's channeling her ability, she doesn't take any damage. So her survival is a 2. And her utility is only at a 2 as well. She only protects herself. So Fiora is generally a pretty bad unit. You only want to use her if you want to go for the 6 Nobles buff, which is a very good win condition in the late game, or you want to get some Blade Masters going on. But without using her tribes, Fiora is not going to be a good unit in your team. So I give Fiora an F tier. Wow, Fiora is just not something you want to pick up unless you want to go for one of those synergies. All right, next up, we've got everybody's favorite spinner. We have a Garen. Garen is a noble knight, and his ability is called Judgment, which he makes it so that he spins around and then constantly deals damage to all his surrounding units every second. He spins for 4 seconds, but he actually applies his damage 9 times. So as you can see in the tooltip, it says 60 damage per tick, but it's actually 9 applications of that. Dude, that's like 540 damage over the course of his channeling. So if you compare that to like Darius or Fiora, you can see how much more damage he deals with his ability. His damage is at the 3. It's really, really powerful. Also, for some reason, while he's spinning, he also takes no magic damage at all. Okay, he still gets stunned or CC'd or whatever, but no magic damage at all. So, you know, if your opponent is a caster, then he's spinning, then he's basically gaining health at that point. So his survival is very high too, at a 3. And of course, since he does AoE damage and he can move while he spins, his utility is quite high too. So he gets a 3 at the utility level, which makes him an overall very, very solid character. You can just put him into any comp, especially early game, and he will do really, really well. So he gets an A from me. Next up is Graves. Graves is a kind of an interesting character where he doesn't actually have an ultimate. His passive is Buckshot, where he deals increased damage and hits all enemies in front of him in a cone shape instead of, you know, charging an ultimate. So that means he doesn't actually have a mana bar. He's also a pirate and a gunslinger, if you're building those synergies. So Graves by itself, he attacks really, really slow. He does do AoE damage every hit, so that's pretty good. So he gets a 2 from damage. However, he's kind of squishy. He is a melee character that is not supposed to take damage. He's more of a melee DPSer, if that makes sense. So his survival is at a 1. He doesn't actually, you know, protect himself at all. So he relies on your other tanks to do the job for you. And his utility is at 2 because at least he does a little bit of area effect damage using his ability. So overall, he needs some help, you know, being good. You need to have, like, you know, once again, some synergies or make an early level 2 Graves for it to be kind of worth it in the early game. So overall, he gets a D rank from me. Next up, we have Kassadin. Kassadin is a Void Sorcerer and also has only a passive ability. His ability is called Netherblade, where every auto attack he steals mana from his enemies, and then that mana transfers into a shield that lasts for 4 seconds. And, you know, the mana steal gets higher the higher level he is. He is a very, very good disable and disruption unit. Usually people put units that really want to ult in the front line because to charge mana in this game, similar to all other auto chess games, you either take damage or you deal damage. So units at the front naturally just, you know, get mana faster and they can use their ability faster, which is their ultimate. It's kind of interchangeable. So Kassadin, if you put him in a very specific spot that can prevent, for example, a Garen from spinning, or even late game, if you can prevent a Sejuani or a Gnar from ultimating, then dude, the game is going to swing in your favor. So Kassadin is a very strong unit in that sense. He doesn't do a lot of damage. He's a 2 at damage. He's also a 2 at survivability, giving himself a shield. But his passive has a lot of utility. It can actually single-handedly win games. Is at a 3. I'll give him a C. Overall, Kassadin is a very good unit as long as you have, you know, tanks and DPSers. He's not really good at both. He's only good in disruption. So if you got those fields figured out, then he can actually attack your enemy's team at a different angle, which is mana drain, where not a lot of other champions can do that. Next up, we've got Khazix, our first assassin, who is also a void. And Khazix has an ability called Taste Their Fear, where he basically charges up an attack and slashes the enemy that's closest to him. If the enemy is alone, it deals additional damage. It's kind of like 2.5 times more damage, so it's a lot of damage. And also, it's a good time to explain assassins. So assassins in Teamfight Tactics, they teleport to the furthest spot away from them. So, when the fight starts, they'll try and see what the furthest enemy is, and then they'll turn invisible and then leap in onto them. So it's actually very important to kind of know where to position your assassins based on this mechanic. Okay, but Khazix by himself, he does a lot of damage. All right, his ability does a lot of damage. His auto attack does a lot of damage as well. And since he's an assassin, he can also just skip through your enemy's front line and hit the back line where it's full of nice squishies like casters and ranged DPS, yeah? So his damage is really high, it's a 3. He's kind of squishy. His health pool is very, very low. So his survivability is actually a 1. However, since he's an assassin, he has kind of a natural kind of evasion, right? Because your opponent's not going to target Khazix first at all, since, he's going to turn invisible. They're going to target the tanks first. So he's a little bit natural built-in survivals, and we're going to see that in every single assassin going forward. He has a little bit of utility. So his utility ranking is at a 2, and that's just because that his ability can deal so much burst damage. Especially to ranged units at the back, because ranged units tend to separate themselves out from the entire group as, teams kind of merge together in the middle to fight, so they have to move a little bit. Khazix can just one-shot, squishy ranged units. So if you're gonna actually kill them before they cast their ultimate, then there is a little bit of utility there. It's kind of like silencing your opponent's unit, right? So Khazix is definitely pretty good start. And if you start with Khazix, then make sure to look towards Void and Assassins comps. I'm gonna give him a C. He's pretty good. Next up, we've got Mordekaiser. Mordekaiser is a Phantom and also a Knight, and his ability is Obliterate, where he slams his hammer in front of him 2 spaces, so the space that he's directly facing and 1 space behind, and deals damage to both those units. And it's pretty chunky damage. It's not too good. It's not too bad. It's reasonable. The damage is a little chunky. He basically attacks for about 3 auto attacks worth of damage. However, his auto attack is very, very low. He doesn't auto attack for a lot. You really want to use him to do the ability damage, and you also want to pair him out with a Phantom. Phantoms are a very, very important tribe that you want 2 of to make it so that you swing the battle in your favor. But Mordekaiser as a whole is actually quite squishy. He looks like a very big creature, but he only has 500 health. So yeah. You would think that he survives a lot, but no, his survival is actually at a 2, and his damage is also at a 2. He really relies on his ability to deal damage. He has somewhat good utility, dealing damage to 2 units, so his utility is a 2. But overall, don't let the big armor, think that he's actually like a really, really buff character in that sense. You really need to be using his Phantom tribe for him to be worth a unit. But yeah, so overall, he's only a D. Okay, next up we've got Nidalee. Nidalee is a wild shapeshifter, and when Nidalee uses her ability, it's actually 2 effects in 1. First of all, she applies a heal over time on herself, so it's kind of like a potion, and she also applies the same heal to one of your units that have the least HP. So think of Nidalee as like a healer. However, once she does that, she also transforms into a panther, where she becomes a melee unit instead, and then gains attack damage. Attack damage scales up as her level goes along. And man, that is a stacked ability. The heal is actually pretty significant. It's not nothing. And since she targets the lowest health character, you know that the heal is gonna get the maximum benefit, which is insane. She's a really, really powerful unit. And Wild is also one of the best tribes to build right now, because in in Teamfight Tactics, the faster a unit attacks, the faster they can gain mana, and that also means that the faster they can charge up the ulti and also DPS and focus units down, for example. Nidalee is really powerful. She does good damage, so it's a 2 in damage. She survives a lot, and she helps your friends survive as well, so survival's a 2. And also, she brings a lot of utility to the table because she doesn't only take care of herself, she takes care of your whole team. So her utility is at a 3. And overall, that makes a very solid 1 cost character at a B. Tristana is next, and she is a Yordle gunslinger. She has a ability, which is called Explosive Charge, where she puts a bomb on one of your enemy opponents, and then it explodes after a certain duration or after she attacks 3 times. The bomb explodes for AoE damage, and it's actually a pretty big circle. It's the range of the bomb is actually 2 hexes away, and you know, she just keeps on firing and dealing damage herself as well. As a DPS, she is really good at dishing out damage, especially if you load her up with items. She's a very good win condition, especially if you build gunslingers as well. So her damage is at a 3. She is squishy as hell. Alright, if anybody touches Tristana, she's basically dead. So her survival is at an all-time low. It's at a 1. And she does bring a little utility to the team because she does deal a little bit of AoE damage. But most importantly, she just, you know, deals, you know, a lot of single target damage, which brings her a utility at a 2. Overall, she's a very solid character. She transitions really well, especially with good items, with good tribes, and with, you know, a high level Tristana. Like a level 3 Tristana can actually be your late game build. So her rank is pretty good. I'll give her a B. Alright, next up we got Vayne. Vayne is our noble ranger here, costing 1, and her ability is actually a passive. She doesn't cast anything, but she does apply silver bolts to whatever she attacks, and once a target has 3 silver bolts stacks, they kind of explode, and it deals true damage based on how much maximum health they have. And you know, you can see that based on the low circles that are under a character when Vayne is attacking. So Vayne stacks really well with attack speed, right? You want her to fire as many times as possible, which means that, you know, she can stack up those silver bolts really fast, and then the true damage can just kind of melt any tank. You know, especially, you know, your Garens and your Cho'Gaths and your Sejuanis, stuff like that. So because of this true damage aspect, she's actually very dangerous late game to deal with. Her damage is a 3. Like most ranged DPSers, she's very squishy. If anything touches her, she's basically dead. So her survival is a 1. And because this pure damage factor that she has, that no other unit has, alright? She's the only unit in the game that can deal true damage. Her utility is actually pretty good at a 2. Overall, she's a pretty good unit. I would say I would give her a C. And yeah, if you get a very quick Vayne, then look to either build nobles or look to either build rangers. Alright, finally we have Warwick. Warwick is the last 1 cost unit that is a wild brawler. And his ability is called Infinite Duress, where he would choose the lowest health enemy, no matter where it is on the battlefield, and he will leap onto him, and then he would swing 3 times, which basically stuns them, damages them, and heals himself for a good amount of damage. This is really good at executing units that are about to die. So Warwick is really good at, you know, making your team very efficient at killing and, you know, neutralizing your opponent's units. His damage is reasonable. Outside of his ability, he does okay at all the attack damage, so he's at a 2. His survival is also pretty good because he heals himself when he's channeling, so it's also at a 2. And then his utility is actually quite high because he does finish off those units that are, you know, about to die but not really, and then if they're about to ulti when they're low health, then Warwick actually stuns them before they can get the ulti off. So overall, that makes a very strong character at a B. Alright, so those are all the 1 cost units. Here's a recap screen of all the 1 cost units listed by the rank. As you can see, Garen is definitely at the top. You have a lot of units that are really awesome. There are some units that are synergy dependent, and then you got Fiora at the bottom. Onwards to our 2 cost units. First up, we've got Ahri. Ahri is a wild sorcerer that basically has a very interesting spell. It's called Orb of Deception, where she fires an orb that deals damage to units in the line, and then it bounces back to her, which deals damage again. So it's basically like 2 portions of damage. The Ahri AI in this game is not quite good. Sometimes she'll target units that kind of just die on the 1 hit, and then other times she'll also target units that are going to die but not quite yet, because she does have a little channeling time. So in that sense, Ahri is not that good in the damage department, but just do know that the orb deals a lot of damage once it works. And if you put Ahri in a corner in in the battlefields, you can actually have the maximum percentage chance of hitting a lot of enemy units, and that's because she can either shoot straight or diagonally, whereas if she's in the middle, then there's more directions for orb to fly in, and there's more chances that she'll actually whiff in her ability. So make sure you do that. Ahri's ability does a lot of damage, and all attacks are not that high, but hey, her ability makes up for the damage for sure. It's at a 3. She's a caster, so she cannot take any hits. Place Protector, her survival is a 1, and she does do a little bit of area effect damage, which makes her utility at a 2. And overall, making a pretty solid unit at a B. Ahri is a pretty good unit, and Wild is a very strong synergy right now, so I would definitely recommend picking her up. Next up, we've got Blitzcrank. Blitzcrank is the only robot in the game, and he's also a brawler. And then his ability is called Rocket Grab, where he pulls the furthest enemy to him and then punches them for a 1 second stun, something like that. The punch deals no extra damage, but the Rocket Grab does deal damage, so that's pretty cool. So Blitzcrank is really good in displacing your opponent's carry. Usually in TFT, people like to put their carry unit at the very, very corner. So, your Tristanas and your Vaynes and whatnot. So Blitzcrank is really good at kind of countering those units, especially if they're stacked with items or very high level and your opponent's team is all revolved around that. So you can pick up Blitzcrank if you can do that. However, Blitzcrank's problem is that, well, 1, he doesn't do a lot of damage. His damage is the 1. And well, he does have pretty good survival and utility. They're both at 3 because he does, kind of sneakily grab one of your opponent's units up to the open. One of Blitzcrank's weaknesses is that he's a robot, and that's actually a big weakness, because in TFT you really need to find as much synergies as you can. Synergies are actually worth a lot. They're probably worth a unit by itself, and because Blitzcrank is only a robot, he only affects himself. He starts every combat at full mana, but then he doesn't affect anybody else. So you have to be very careful with Blitzcrank. Just don't be scared of either signing him out when you need synergies, or even actually buying him and putting him in if your opponent has like that 1 carry that you really need to kill. Overall, he's a C. Next up, we've got Braum. Braum is a Glacial Guardian, and his ability is Unbreakable, where he puts up a big shield in front of him that blocks incoming damage, and the incoming damage affects everything. So, it can affect spells, it can affect all auto attacks. It basically attacks everything, which is nice. The damage reduction is quite high. It's at 60 at level 1, and then 75 at 90, and it does last a long time as well. However, he does 0 damage. Brahma is at 1 in the damage department. He's just basically a tank, which means that his survival must be really good. His survival is at a 3. His utility is not that high. It's at a 2. However, he does keep blocking damage so that you buy more time for your damage dealers to deal damage or your sorcerers to ult. So he can do that. Just make sure that if you put Braum in your team, you have enough damage to actually take care of your opponent's stuff. It might usually be better to pick a unit that can do everything in the first place. Whereas if you just pick Braum, he's only going to be a tank for you. He's like kind of a meat shield. So meat shields, in my opinion, get a D. Next up, we've got Elise. Elise is our demon shapeshifter, costing 2, and when she is full mana, she will transform into her spider form, where spiderlings are gonna also drop from the field, which are basically summon units, and she also gains lifesteal as well after being in spider form. It's very, very difficult to get Elise to transform without the help of items, and even then, she doesn't really get a steroid ability, right? She only grants herself lifesteal instead of like plus attack or plus attack speed or plus true damage or like a proc effect. So Elise is kind of hard to use correctly in that department. Even when she transforms, she deals the same amount of damage, which is basically a 1 in the damage meter. And there's so many times that Elise just dies before she actually gets to transform. So her survival is also at a 1. She does bring some utility to the table because, you know, she does summon units like Spiralings so that, you know, if your opponent's hitting the Spiralings, they're not hitting your other champions. So, you know, that's a good distraction. But overall, Elise is a very, you know, subpar unit, I guess. You really need to be using her tribes, or you need to be using her, you know, spiders to do a little bit of bonus things for her to be good. So overall, she's a D. Next up, we've got Lissandra, a Glacial Elementalist that casts Frozen Tomb. Frozen Tomb has 2 different effects. The first effect is she ices an enemy opponent and stuns them for basically 2 seconds. Slows everything around them, which is attack speed basically. And also emanates a aura that deals damage as well. So it's kind of, think of it as like an AoE Frost Nova back in Warcraft 3 Lich days, I guess. That also stuns the main target. So that's the first part. The second part only happens if Lissandra is below half HP. If that's the case, and she also has a full bar of mana, she actually ultimates herself instead, gaining invulnerability. So basically she's invulnerable rather than dealing damage to herself, right? So she cannot be targeted for the duration, and also applying the same circle of frost that deals damage and slows enemies around her instead. It's kind of interesting in that sense that, you know, she can protect herself or deal damage, but overall her damage is very low. Even with the AoE, she doesn't do quite enough damage to be significant. You do need to help pile more AoE effects to make Lissandra's AoE kind of worth it in a sense. Lissandra's damage is at a 1. She does survive quite well. You know, she can ulti herself when she's about to die, which basically prolongs her life a bit. But even then, she's not gonna deal any more damage. And getting to her second ulti is very difficult because this ultimate actually takes a long time to charge up. So her survivability is even at a 3, but her utility is at a 2 because, like I said, if she survives, she doesn't really do much other than that. So Lissandra gets a D from me. Next up, we've got Lucien. Lucien is a gunslinger that's also a noble, and he likes to dash around with his ability called Relentless Pursuit. It's very fast to charge this, very low mana cost, and once he dashes, he usually picks a spot that's away from enemy units, so he can run away from melee units, for example. And then after he dashes, he fires a normal attack and a special attack really fast. The special attack deals magic damage instead of attack damage, and he actually does this really fast. Lucien is not a bad carry. His damage is reasonable. His damage is at 3. You do need to stockpile items on him a lot for him to carry the late game, and usually flat damage is better because he does do a double attack every turn. So you know, he can make use of that attack damage quite well. His survival is at a 2 because he can dodge stuff, and sometimes, dude, Lucien dodging a very important skill shot or a stun just feels like the best thing in the world. So yeah, but overall his utility is basically non-existent. He only deals damage. He only, you know, kind of blinks away and tries and, you know, take care of himself. So his utility is at a 1, and overall that makes a character of a C rank. Alright, next up we've got Lulu, a Yordle sorcerer with the ability called Wild Growth. Wild Growth makes one of your teammates really big, and in the process of doing it, knocks everything that's around them up for like a second. And then, you know, it also gives them extra health. It also deals a little bit of magic damage to the surrounding enemies as well. And as you level Lulu, she can also cast this ultimate on multiple allies at the same time. So 2 for level 2 and 3 at level 3. And do note that she can also target herself. So with basically no damage skills, her damage meter is at a 1. However, because of this very special, you know, crowd control plus healing mix ability, we're gonna give her a survivability of 3, and we're also gonna give her a utility of 3. She's a really good support unit, and as with all support units go, make sure that you do have a team that can deal damage and also take damage. She's one of the, you know, third factor after you accomplish the first 2. Lulu's a good unit. I'll give her a C. So next up, we've got Pike. Pike is a pirate assassin that casts Phantom Undertow. So, like I said, if you remember, assassins teleport to the enemy backline at the fight start. And Phantom Undertow makes Pike dash towards the furthest enemy. So basically now he's gonna teleport to the front line and then leave behind a ghost, and then the ghost travels to him after a delay, and then anybody who gets hit by the ghost will get stunned for a very long time and also take some magic damage. Now this stun is actually really long. It's actually 2.5 seconds at level 1, and then it gets like even more crazy at the higher level it goes. Pike is like really powerful in making your opponent not be able to do anything. His damage is kind of okay since he's an assassin, so his damage at a 2. You do want your damage sources to come from elsewhere since he's mainly there for the stun and the utility of his ability, which means that his utility is an all-time high. He's actually has a 4 stars in utility, which is really good. And of course, because he semi-protects himself after casting an ability, you know, he gets very low health, and then he casts his ability, and then your opponent has lost track of where Pike is, so he can't get bursted down anymore. That gives him a survival ranking of 2, which overall makes this a very good character. Yeah, Pike is awesome. More people need to start using Pike. I think a lot of people underestimate him a lot. He gets a B. Alright, next up we've got Reksai. Reksai is a Void Brawler that has the Burrow ability, where she leaps into the ground very slowly. She heals herself for a little bit, and then she comes back up, stuns whatever is in front of her for 1 second, and deals a little bit of damage. Man, Reksai is a very disappointing character. She just doesn't do any damage at all. She's more of a tank with that much health. She actually has a lot of base health at level 1, 650. And the fact that she can also heal herself means that, you know, her survivability is really high. So we have a low damage character that's a 1 in damage, and we have a high survivability character that's a 3 in survivability. And overall, that makes it a very low utility character. Sure, when she comes up, she stuns an opponent and damages them, but for 1 second, it's actually nothing like crazy, because like, I mean, at 2 costs, we see like a lot of AoE stuns or like stuns that last forever, for example. So Reksai has a 1 in utility and basically makes her an F character. You do not want to play Reksai unless you're going for one of those synergies. Alright, next up we've got Shen, the first ninja in the game. Ninjas are only good if you have 1 ninja on the battlefield. They get extra attack damage, or if you collect all 4 ninjas, so that's important to know. He's also a Blade Master. His ability is called Spirit's Refuge, where he channels a little bit and does some finger motions, and then after that, a zone appears around him, which follows him wherever he goes, and then anybody standing within the zone will be dodging 100% of attacks that come to them, which does have a little bit of significance because dodge abilities or dodge attacks cannot gain your opponent's mana. So Shen does help with that. However, Shen does basically no damage because he only does auto attacks and he only does this ability. Even being a ninja with a 40% attack damage increase, if he's the only one on the board, makes it so that 40% of 0 is still kind of 0, right? So yeah, Shen does not do any damage. His damage department is at a 1. He's really good at protecting himself, so his survival is a 3. And he's also pretty good at protecting your other units, especially squishies like sorcerers and ranged carries. So his utility is also at a 3, and overall that makes a pretty solid character of a C. Next up, we've got Varus. Varus is a demon ranger, and he has an ability called Piercing Arrow. He charges for a little while, and then he unleashes the arrow, dealing damage to everything in a straight line. Now, this straight line is only 1 hex, so it has to be very exact. The line has to hit a champion directly, or it doesn't do any damage, and the damage is very significant. 400 at level 1, which is kind of like half the health pool of most champions at this point of the game. So this is very chunky damage, right? It's a 3 at the damage meters. You know, being a ranger, he cannot take any damage, so it's a 1 in survivability. And because once again he deals a little bit of AoE damage, he gets a utility ranking of 2. He's actually alright. Varus falls off late game really fast because he does need a channel to use the arrow, and anytime he gets stunned out of the animation, he actually just lost the time that he could spend auto attacking anyways. So really good in mid game and early game, honestly, but late game you might want to look towards something else. Varus gets a C from me. And finally, we have Zed, which is the other ninja at cost 2. He's also a assassin. And his ability is raise shuriken. It's very simple. He just throws a shuriken and deals damage in front of him in a line formation. Zed is reasonable. I mean, he's not really that good. It's not really that bad. He deals a lot of damage because, you know, his whole kit is basically damage. So his damage meter is at 3. He doesn't really survive that well, but like I said, if he's an assassin, so he can kind of protect himself a little bit that way. So his survivability is a 1. And because he does AoE damage once again in a line form, he still gets a good utility, which is at a 2. So overall, Zed is a C. So don't be afraid to sub in Zed if you need more damage, and sub out Zed if you find a better ninja along the way. And here is the ranking list for all the 2-cost units. And as you can see, all the 2-cost units are, you know, about the same in terms of power level. None of them are exactly like overpowered or anything, except for, you know, probably Reksai at the bottom that you do not really want unless you really want the Void synergy, which is honestly not really that strong to begin with. Alright, onwards to the 3-cost units. Let's start with Aatrox. Aatrox is a Demon Blade Master, and his ability is called the Darkened Blade, where he slams the sword in a hex in front of him, and then whoever's standing in the hex and everything around it in a circle takes a little bit of damage. And by a little bit, I mean, you know, a significant chunk. There's 350 damage at level 1 and 600 damage at level 2. The main problem of Aatrox is that, you know, his ability only deals AoE damage and doesn't really deal anything more than that. As you can see throughout the list of cost 3 units, that there's a lot of abilities at this point that get pretty exciting. They have a lot of different utility. Aatrox in this way is just a damage dealer, so if you do require some more damage at this point of the game, then you do want to pick him up. He's a 3 in damage. He's also pretty good at survivability. I'm giving him 2. And then his utility is reasonable. He does do AoE damage in a circle, so his utility is also at a 2, making him an all-right unit at a C. So once again, pick this guy up if you want him for his tribal bonuses, or pick him up if you need some damage in the front line. Next up, we have Ashe. Ashe is a Glacial Ranger, and she attacks, well, she has a pretty good attack speed, and she also does pretty good damage. Her ultimate is Enchanted Crystal Arrow, where she fires an arrow that stuns and damages the furthest enemy. So she aims at a unit, and then she fires it, and whatever the unit first touches will actually get stunned for 1 second per square that it traveled. So the further the arrow travels, the longer stun. And also when you rank her up, that the arrow will deal more damage and do more stun as well. So Ashe is actually a pretty solid character. She does a lot of damage, like I said. So she's at a 3 in terms of damage. She doesn't really survive really well being a ranger. So she's at 1 in for survivability. But like I said, her Enchanted Crystal Arrow stuns the furthest enemy, and the furthest enemies tends to be the ones that are kind of the most dangerous, right? So if you place your Ashe in the corner and the fight breaks out, then she tends to aim at one of your opponent's DPSers, like one of the ranged attackers at the backline. So if you can neutralize their damage for, you know, some time, then, you know, you have a big edge in the fight. So her utility for her Enchanted Crystal Arrow is a 3, and overall that makes Ashe a very strong character at a B. Do keep in mind that she is also glacial, so if you do build the glacial bonuses, then she gives you even more stun potential. Alright, next up we've got Evelyn. Evelyn is a demon assassin, so she will teleport backwards, and then her ability is called Last Caress, where she deals damage to the 3 closest enemies in a kind of like a semi-circle hex area. And then she also teleports backwards. This damage gets insane if she actually gets to deal damage to low health enemies. And the low health enemies threshold is at 33%. So if they're a third of their HP, this basically executes them, unless they're like a tank like Cho'Gath or something. Evelyn does not seem to be that damaging outside of her ulti. Her auto attack's pretty low, and if she doesn't get to execute any units, then, you know, the ability does, you know, a fairly moderate amount of damage. It's nothing insane. So her damage level is at 2. Being an assassin, her survival is just like the other ones, which is at 1, and her utility is not insanely high. Sure, she does AoE damage in 3 hexes, and, you know, that can affect some units, but most of the time, it will only deal damage to 2 or even 1 unit. And because that's basically what she's auto-attacking. She cannot move to a optimal spot because she's a melee character. And normally she just, just hits something that, she's auto-attacking. So in that sense, her utility is kind of low. She's at a 2 in terms of utility. And that makes her a rank D in terms of, just unit rankings. Next up, we've got Gangplank. Gangplank is a pirate and both a gunslinger and a blade master. So he's a little bit of both. And, he's really good at, building synergies, especially if you're trying to build both blade masters and gunslingers. His ability is a little bit weird. So there's a passive. The passive is he drops barrels randomly on the map every now and then. And then when he reaches full mana, he shoots the sky and then he detonates all the barrels and the barrels all explode and deal damage to random enemy units that are, unlucky enough to stand next to them. The main problem with Gangplank's ultimate is that his barrels do not target. So his barrels are actually random. He can actually throw a barrel behind your archers and whatever, and there's no enemy units there. And then the barrel can still be there. So the barrels do not have a smart targeting system, which means that this ulti is actually pretty bad. If you manage to do a lot of damage, then you just got lucky with the barrel throws, or even maybe you're playing against assassins and they just kind of run into your barrels. But overall, you're not picking Gangplank for his ultimate. You're picking him more for his tribal abilities. He's both a blade master and gunslinger. He doesn't do a lot of damage himself as well. So overall, GP is a pretty mediocre character by himself. It doesn't actually fit into a lot of team comps. Having a 1 in damage, a 2 in survivability, and a 2 in utility is not enough to make me want to just randomly buy him as a very good unit. So he's a D character, but do keep in mind that he has 3 separate tribal synergies that you can build towards. Next up, we've got Katarina. Katarina is a very special assassin. First of all, she's an Imperial assassin. But most importantly, her ultimate is one of the strongest in the game. It's called Death Lotus. And Death Lotus is a channeled ability that makes her spin around and throw daggers to a lot of targets every second. So every second she throws 6 daggers and the channel duration is 2.5 seconds. So if you can add that up, it's basically 15 damage instances to multiple enemies. So it's just basically insane amounts of damage. It's a 4 in damage. We haven't seen a 4 in damage yet so far. However, the main challenge of Katarina is getting to that level that she can actually ultimate. Like any assassin, her survivability is a 1, and because she does AoE damage, her utility is a 2. But the main problem is that she needs to reach that mana point. And usually, units can only reach that mana point by dealing damage and taking damage, right? Katarina cannot take damage. She's going to blow up. So what you want to do is you want to equip mana items on her, or even attack speed items. And that way, she can actually ultimate. And if she ultimates, she can actually win you the game. If you notice that your Katarina is not ulting, then make sure you either make it so that she does, or you replace her with a unit that actually does something better. Overall, Katarina is a build-around character, and she's a C. Next up, we've got Kenan. Kenan is a ninja that's also a Yordle, that's also an elementalist. So once again, 3 tribes synergies, and it can help you, get a lot of bonuses. His ultimate is called Slicing Maelstrom. He summons a storm that's kind of like a 1 space away from him, and it basically damages people who are standing in the storm every second. And if they stand in them for 3 ticks of damage, they also get stunned for a little while, which is actually pretty good. Think of it as like kind of a AoE damage and stun that's centered around him. Kenan is one of the stronger units there are, because he does really high damage. His damage clocks in at a 3, both utilizing the damage from being a ninja and also the ability. He's always a survival. He's a 2, and his utility is pretty high because he delivers an area effect ability that also kind of disables your enemy team. So he's a very strong unit. He's an A. and gets even better if you can utilize one of his synergies. Honestly, every team can use a ninja at some point in time because ninjas get really, really powerful if they're by themselves. So if you are looking for, you know, a very well-rounded character and you're missing, you know, either some more AoE damage or some disables, then you should pick Kenan up. All right, onwards to Morgana. Morgana is a demon sorcerer, and very similar to Kenan, she has an AoE ability. It's called Soul Shackles. So as soon as she casts the Soul Shackles, she links every enemy unit around her with herself that deals some initial damage. And then if they are still linked after a short delay, then she deals another instance of damage and also stuns them, which is quite insane. So usually this means that if Morgana survives long enough, then the chain can deal another damage. So it's kind of like double damage and also stun. The main challenge is actually getting Morgana to live. So make sure you can do that because she's kind of squishy being a sorcerer. So her stats are 2 in attack in damage, 2 in survivability, and 3 in utility. Because, well, once again, AoE stuns are just really, really powerful. Morgana's one is a little bit harder to pull off compared to Kenan because she needs to survive the full duration, whereas Kenan only needs to survive for 3 ticks of the Slicing Maelstrom to proc. So yeah, Morgana's alright. I'll give her a C. She's pretty good in sorcerer comps. Next up, we've got Poppy. Poppy is a Yordle Knight, and she has an ability called Keeper's Verdict. Swinging her hammer at whatever she's attacking, it damages that unit and knocks them up for a little bit of stun duration, and you know, it does a little bit of damage as well. The problem with Poppy is that her base stats are pretty bad. Outside of getting a pretty significant chunk of health, she really doesn't do much. She just does not do any damage at all. Her damage is at a 1. Her survivability is alright. You know, like I said, she has a lot of health, and she also stuns whatever she's attacking, so she gets a little bit more survivability there. So she gets a 3 for survival, and her utility is okay. She stuns a unit, so it's a 2. Overall, though, at this point of the game, you do not want a unit that is that bad, right? Like Poppy is just overall the stat, it just does not line up to a typical 3 cost character, and she is also a knight, and knight is very hard to build towards. You kind of have to go all in on this for it to be worth your time, and Poppy is just not that good. So I actually give Poppy an F. She's pretty bad. I would not want to play her in my teams. Next up, we've got Rengar. Rengar is a wild assassin, and what he does is he uses a move called Savagery, leaping to the weakest enemy and then attacks them for a little bit of damage. He also gains attack speed and critical strike chance after the initial attack. So it's kind of like self buff. Think of it kind of as like a Warwick, but assassin type instead, where he actually buffs himself instead of doing the little stun thing, which makes him a little bit worse because Rengar is already kind of squishy, but you know, he does deal a lot of damage, and if you can put some survival items on him, then he can actually make use of an attack speed and the critical strike chance. So with you know, his damage is a 3. His survival is actually not bad. If you look at his stats, he actually has reasonable health, a little bit higher than normal assassins, but still very low at 550. So it's actually at a 2, and you know, his utility is basically non-existent because even though he leaps to the weakest enemy, he doesn't really stun them, or he doesn't really survive after that, or he doesn't really buff his health pool, which is the main concern, right? So Rengar is a 1 in terms of utility, and overall that makes him a D character. You usually use Rengar because you need the 4th wild character to complete your wild synergy. Next up, we've got Shyvana. Shyvana is a dragon shapeshifter, and Shyvana is actually pretty strong. When she reaches full mana, she becomes a dragon, so she basically dashes backwards. Usually she basically dashes away from the enemy and then becomes a ranged character, and when she's transformed, she gains bonus burn damage, so her attacks set your enemy on fire and deals a lot of burn damage over a duration. She also gains extra damage, and like I said, she becomes a ranged character, which is really, really powerful. Yeah, Shyvana can actually carry you games if you set her up right, and also if you get the dragon synergy going, then she doesn't take any magic damage at all. So yeah, overall very solid carry if you want to look towards, you know, the late game and you want a character that can just dish huge amounts of damage and gets even more amplified with the items that you find. Shyvana has a 4 in terms of damage. Her survival is alright at a 2 because she does leap backwards and kind of saves herself after she transforms. And her utility is actually quite high. It's at a 3. So not only does she deal dot damage, and she also deals a ton of damage, but she also is from the Dragon Tribe, which is very, very good in terms of negating magic damage. So Shyvana gets an A for me. Very, very solid character. Next up, we've got Veigar, who is a Yordle sorcerer. He uses Primordial Burst, which is a burst fireball. Think of it as a fireball where he blasts an enemy with, a lot of magic damage. There's an interesting factor to this, is that if the spell hits an enemy that is currently a lower rank than what your Veigar is, it actually instantly kills them. So it makes more sense for Veigar to kind of have a power spike at level 2 and also at level 3. So a 3-star Veigar can basically start one-shotting, 2-star units instantly, which is insane if you think about it. Like if you target something like, a Cho'Gath or like, one of the level 5 units, like a level 2 Yasuo, for example, then it can pretty insane really fast. Veigar's damage is off the charts. It's at the 4. However, being a sorcerer, he is super squish, so it's a 1. And also he has 0 utility, right? He only deals like a lot of damage, and if he does not one-shot a character, then it's even worse. So his utility is also at a 1. So make sure you cover all the other weaknesses from a team comp that Veigar needs. So yeah, like I said, Veigar needs a very good front line. Veigar needs, things that protect him and make sure that he gains mana fast, stuff like that. So Veigar is overall a C. And onwards to our last character. Last character is Volibear for 3 cost units. Volibear is a Glacial Brawler, and he has a Thunderclaw's ability where once he reaches full mana, he uses this, and then it lasts throughout the whole fight. He basically uses lightning attacks now. So what lightning attacks means is that he auto attacks one unit, and then the lightning jumps to another unit, and then the lightning jumps to another unit, and so on. Which basically means he auto attacks everybody at the same time. The damage is a little bit lower than an auto attack because there is a chain damage multiplier, but the lightning can actually apply on-hit effects, which is actually insane. So what on-hit effects means is that if you have an item that activates when you auto attack an enemy, such as like the red buff, then it actually can trigger. It also triggers off its glacial bonus. So if you have a lot of glacials, then Volibear can actually become like a stun unit, AoE stun unit that is, which is very, very spooky. Volibear has very high damage as it clocks in at 4. His survivability is at a 2. Because he is actually quite tanky, but you do want to protect him a bit because you want him to live as long as possible. And his utility is at a 3, where, like I said, if you can get to the level where he can chain stun a lot of units, then it can get pretty powerful. So overall, Volibear is a very strong unit. I give him a B. And if you can build around him, such as stacking him with a lot of items, making a lot of glacials, making a lot of tanks, it can also be your carry character, which is something to be very mindful of. And those are the 3 cost units. Outside of Poppy, most of the 3 cost units do provide some sort of interesting utility in terms of AoEs and stuff like that, or it kind of finishes off your tribal builds. Alright, onwards to perhaps the best and most exciting cost units in the game. These are the cost units of 4. In TFT, units that cost 4 are actually quite insane. All of them are just like really, really powerful. I think the devs purposely made it that way. So every time you see a 4 cost unit, there is a huge incentive to buy it and also build around it. The earliest 4 cost unit you can get is level 5. So if you are lucky to get one, you can actually just buy immediately and kind of change your strategy to orient your team around that unit. So let's go ahead and start with Akali. Akali is a ninja assassin, and she actually is quite insane. She has an ability called 5-point strike, where she throws shurikens to one unit away from her. So basically, usually, whatever she's auto-attacking. And it deals a freaking lot of damage. It deals 200 damage at level 1. And not only that, it also has the chance to crit. There's not a lot of abilities in this game that can critical strike, but Akali is one of them. The ability can actually deal, much more damage than normal. And it also has the lowest charge mana cost in the game. It only takes 25 mana to charge her ultimate, which means that usually it only takes her 2 auto attacks to use an ulti, and if you have any items on her, then she can even go even more crazy. Yeah. Her attack is insane. Her attack chart is at 4. She's pretty good at survival. As an assassin, you would think that she's kind of squished, but her health pool is pretty high because, well, once again, she is a 4-cost unit. So she is at a 2 in terms of survival. And utility-wise, she doesn't really have too much utility, clocking it at 2 stars. But she does do a lot of damage, and when you have such a high damage character that starts to assassinate your opponent's backline, it actually gets a lot of secret utility where, you know, you kind of just nullify their Tristana or their Vayne and just remove them from the fight completely before Akali dies. So there's a lot of value to Akali. I give her an A. Next up, we've got Aurelius Sol. Aurelius Sol is a dragon sorcerer and possibly the coolest looking unit in the entire game. His ultimate is called Voice of Light, and he breathes like a cone of fire, dealing damage to enemies in a straight line. Now, this cone is actually kind of ridiculous. If you compare it to something like Varus, where Varus's arrow only reaches 1 hex, one hex length, this cone actually reaches a 3 hex length. So not only does it deal damage to everything in that line, it also damages the lines beside it as well. So this cone is actually huge. It is not unlikely that Aurelius Sol can actually just ulti your opponent's entire team, and that's why his damage is actually off the charts. His damage is actually insane. 6 stars, the most damage dealing character in the entire game, because it is actually area effect as well, right? I only award a 6 stars to 1 unit in the game for each category, and Aurelius Sol is the unit that has the most damage potential out of every unit in the game. You want to really protect him, this one, because, you know, he's squished as hell. He only has a 1 in survivability, and then you know, his utility is actually insane, right? If a unit can actually damage your entire team every spell cast, then that is very, very good utility. It's a 4. I rate this character an S tier. Aurelius Sol is just absolutely godlike. A 2-star Aurelian just basically decimates your opponent's teams, and that's not even counting items you want to put on him, right? You want to put your damage, your ability damage items on him. You want to put mana items so he can ulti faster. You know, you can even put attack speed items on him so that he can auto attack faster and charge up his ulti faster. He is just a win condition in his own right, so definitely look out for Aurelius Sol. Next up, we've got Brand. Brand is a demon elementalist, and what he does is he uses a pyroblast, or what the game calls pyroclasm, where he bounces launches a fireball, and then it bounces around, dealing damage to each enemy hit. Now, it does not have any lingering fire effect. It just deals damage, you know, static damage every bounce. And yeah, Brand does pretty good damage at clocking in at a 4 in damage meters. He's actually pretty good at protecting himself in a sense. He has a moderate to high health pool, like an above average health pool. So survivability is at a 2. And then you know, his utility is reasonable because, once again, if it's a bouncing fireball, then it's kind of like area effect damage, right? And also it targets things that are left alive. Most area effect effects, they kind of they could whiff, right? But not Brand. Brand will always do enough damage that this ability is kind of always going to reach the maximum potential. So utility is at 3, and overall he's a pretty good character, clocking in at a rank of A. Next up, we've got Cho'Gath. Cho'Gath is a void brawler, and he looks like a mess of tentacles, and his ability is called Rupture. So Rupture makes a purple circle on the floor, and then after a few seconds, spikes come out, and then it stuns your enemies for you know, a pretty long time. Dude, and this circle is huge. This circle is like a 3x3 hex, so the circle can actually just stun your opponent's whole team. And Cho'Gath has a huge health pool, okay? Like, his health pool is actually godlike, and that basically means that he's gonna have enough time to basically channel his ultimate every single fight, even at level 1. So even though he doesn't do damage, his damage meter is only at 2 stars because it only relies on his ultimate to deal damage. His survivability, like I said, is just so freaking high. It's actually at 6 stars, the highest health in the entire game. Coming in at 1100 health at level 1, 2000 health at level 2, and 4000 health at level 3. That's just insane amounts of health numbers, right? It doesn't really matter that his ulti takes a long time to charge because he usually only ultis once, and your opponent is probably going to be dead after that stun because your other units are going to do their work as well, right? So Cho'Gath is a very, very powerful unit coming in at an S tier. Alright, next up we've got Draven. Draven is a damage powerhouse, okay? He flings his axes like no other. First of all, he's an Imperial Blade Master, yeah? But his ability grants him on-hit damage and attack speed, which stacks up to 2 times. The attack is just ridiculous. Like, once he attacks twice, he becomes like a windmill slam jam damage dealer that's just kills things super fast. Outside of that, he doesn't really have a lot of things going on him, but hey, at this point you just want damage, right? Damage is all that matters. Draven is at a 5 in terms of damage, so his survivability is actually pretty good. His health pool is, you know, above average, so it comes in at 2. You do want to protect him though, so you want to put him in a corner or the back line because, you know, you just don't want to expose him to any damage at all. And he has 0 utility. He just has no utility, so 1 star for utility. But yeah, if you have a Draven and you pop him up with items, and if he's holding like 3 completed items, he can just go crazy. So yeah, Draven gets an A tier for me. Alright, onwards with Gnar. Gnar is one of those triple synergy classes again. He is a wild Yordle shapeshifter, so lots of synergies to add. And his ultimate is called Gnar, where he transforms into the big version of himself, and when he does, he actually jumps forward and pushes everything backwards. There's a lot of things to talk about Gnar because this ability is really, really cool, right? So first of all, when he jumps a maximum of 2 squares, and then when he knocks people back, he knocks people back a maximum of 2 hexes as well. The knockback is 2 seconds stun, and he also gains a transform HP bonus, and he also gains a transform damage bonus. So sure, he turns into a melee character afterwards, but he gets really, really buff, right? And not to mention that during that transform, he actually just stunned your opponent's entire team because the stun is like, it reaches super far, and it also stuns for a very long time. Gnar is actually one of the most solid characters to build into, coming in at a 2 attack, 5 survivability, and some of you might have guessed it, a 6 utility level. The utility is just so high because not only does he apply a worldwide stun, he also combos with a lot of characters that can AoE around them. So if you think of something like Kenan or Morgana, Gnar can actually combo off of those units. Knocking your opponent's units back into their ulti is just a sight to behold. So Gnar is actually just an insane character. Definitely recommend you trying to pick him up every time you see him. And yeah, a level 2 Gnar can actually just ulti very consistently. So Gnar gets an S from me. Next up, we've got Kindred. Kindred is our Phantom Ranger, costing 4. She is a Phantom Ranger. Alright, so her ability is called Lamb's Respite, where she creates a zone around herself, and then anybody who's standing in that zone, which is allies. So allies standing in that zone will basically not drop below a certain amount of health for a few seconds, and a few seconds is actually quite long. So for exact numbers, we have 4 seconds at level 1, 5 at level 2, and 6 at level 3. So what that basically means is that you basically gain that much amount of seconds in health. So if your unit would have died in 1 second, think of it as like quadrupling their health, because they now they will survive for 4 seconds instead of 1 second, which is quite insane. So the main challenge of Kindred is to make sure that she does ultimate, and when she ultimates near units that are about to die. Her circle only reaches 1 hex around her, so you have to be very, very careful of that. Her statistics are 2 in case of damage, because she is a ranger. She does do relatively good damage. Very high survivability because of this ability, so it's a 4, and also because of this ability, she gets a utility ranking of 4, making her an A character. She is definitely very strong, But yeah, positioning is the most important part of Kindred. If your Kindred is not doing as much, then you might need to reposition her so that, you know, it works out for you. Next up, we've got Leona. Leona is our noble guardian, and her ability is called Solar Flare. She calls down the power of the sun. Praise the sun. And she damages all units that get hit by the sunlight, and whoever is unfortunate enough to stand in the middle of the sunlight actually gets stunned for a huge amount of time. That's 5 seconds at level 1, 8 seconds at level 2, and 11 seconds at level 3. So basically, Leona just takes out a unit from the fight entirely. Now, Leona is actually kind of a secret character because she actually has the highest armor value in the game, clocking at 55. The second highest armor in the game is tied between a lot of characters at 35. So Leona is actually super freaking tanky. So she's a tank that basically removes a unit from the game from your opponent's side. She does no damage, okay? So if you're looking for damage, you gotta look elsewhere. Her damage is at 1, survivability is at 4, and her utility using the stun and a little bit of AoE damage is at a 3. So generally speaking, Leona is pretty strong, but only if you require a tank. So if you're building a very glass cannon-y build, filled of just damage dealers and like sorcerers and spellcasters and stuff like that, Leona might be the unit for you. So she gets a B from me. And finally, we have Sejuani. Sejuani is actually one of the most iconic characters because, well, first of all, she's a Glacial Knight, but her ultimate is one of the best in the game. It's called Glacial Prison. So what she does is she creates a large blue circle. The circle slowly contracts, and when it reaches the middle, it explodes and it stuns all enemies caught in it for 3, 4, or 5 seconds, depending on levels. And it does a medium amount of damage, but you're most usually looking for the big stun effect from Sejuani. You don't really care about the damage too much. There's a secret thing to Sejuani as well. She has the highest magic resist in the game, clocking at 25, whereas every other character in the game has only 20 magic resist. This coupled with her very high health pool means that she's gonna be a very, very good frontline, right? She's gonna soak damage, she's gonna use her ultimate, and then she's gonna die off, which is gonna be fine because she already accomplished her job. So yeah, Sejuani has a game-changing ulti. So damage is a 2, survivability is a 4 stars, and her utility is actually tied with Gnar, being one of the best and most iconic ultimates to break the game, which is coming in at 6 stars. Sejuani is one of the best units in the game. You definitely just want to include her in your late game comp whenever possible. So S tier unit for me. And there you have it. Those are the 4 cost units. You notice that there are a lot of S tier units, and the worst unit, which is Leona, is actually very, very good already. It's at the B rank. So yeah, like I said, 4 cost units are kind of the most important number in this game. You want to level up fast to get those 4 cost units as soon as possible, and you also want to look out for those 4 cost units early in the game if you're lucky enough to get them, and you can build around them. All right, and finally, the 5 cost units, which are the legendary units. There's only a couple of them, but they are all very, very strong in their own right. Starting with Anivia. Anivia is a glacial elementalist, and what she does is she uses Glacial Storm. So she puts a circle on the ground, which is, it affects the circle it is on and 1 hex beside it. So it's kind of like an area effect of 2. And whoever is, sad enough to stand in it will not only take a lot of damage, but they'll also get their attack speed slowed because it's chilly, right? This is actually really, really high variance ultimate because Anivia can always just ultimate 1 unit, or Anivia can also ultimate your opponent's entire team. So the variance can swing swing a lot for this ability, which makes this kind of unreliable. You kind of want a legendary unit that can always perform, right? Not kind of sometimes halfway perform. Gets better if you're looking for the glacial bonus, gets better if you're looking for the elemental bonus. Overall, you just kind of have to pray if you're playing Anivia that her circle actually hits everything. Her damage is really high, coming in at 4 stars. with an asterisk, I guess, because she does need to hit people with her ulti. Her survivability is alright. It's coming out of 2. And her utility is pretty good, coming out of 3 stars, because, like I said, she does slow your opponent's attack speed, which kind of neuters, which kind of acts as a stun in a sense. She gets a B rank for me. Alright, next up we've got Karthus. Karthus is a Phantom Sorcerer, and his ultimate is probably one of the most easiest to see. When he casts Requiem, you can hear him screaming something crazy like "Beg for your life" or something crazy like that, right? And then after a long channel, he deals damage to some random number of target enemies, and it deals a very good amount of damage. 350 at level 1, but then 550 at level 2. And if you're building Karthus, you're probably going to go sorcerers, and you're probably going to equip it with a lot of spell damage items, right? So then he gets to cast really, really well. Karthus attack damage is out of the charts. It's at the 5 stars. He does not survive at all, but he does have a very high health pool, coming at 850 at level 2. Just because he has a high health pool though doesn't mean you should put him in the front line. Alright, his survival is at 2 stars, and because he does AoE anywhere on the map and it cannot be dodged, right? Because it does come from the sky. So his utility is at 3. The main challenge of Karthus is to make sure that he does not get stunned when he channels his ultimate. So if your opponent has units that get stunned, like say Johnny or Gnar or stuff like that, make sure you place Karthus away from your main team, or maybe at the side as much as possible, so that he does complete his channel. Karthus gets an A from me. Almost to Kayle. Kayle is our Noble Knight legendary unit that casts Divine Judgment. When the Divine Judgment happens, Kayle shields the lowest health a unit in your team. That might include herself, and it makes them immune to damage, and that's immune to all damage. It doesn't make them immune to CC effects, so they can still get stunned or whatever, but it does actually prevent them from taking any damage at all. The higher level Kayle, the more she can actually shield people. She actually starts shielding 2 people at level 2 and 3 people at level 3, and she charges her ulti actually quite fast. This is actually insane, because usually the lowest health units are the ones your opponents are targeting anyways, which means that if she shields a unit that's getting hit, she's effectively extending the life of that unit, right? Which is very awesome. A secret fact that not a lot of people know is that Kayle actually has the highest DPS in the entire game. Her damage combined with her swing speed of attack speed makes her so that she can actually dish out a lot of pain. But because her ultimate does not deal any damage, her damage chart only comes in at 3 stars, while her survivability and her utility comes in at 4 stars each, because her ultimate can actually ruin a lot of focused fire plans. Overall, she is an A. Next up, we've got Misfortune. Misfortune is a pirate gunslinger, and her ultimate is bullet time, which she turns into a maniac and fires a lot of bullets in a cone, and this deals a lot of damage. It's actually super destructive. The cone is actually very large as well. So the channel is at 3 seconds, and the total damage can be 800 to 1000 to 1700 even, depending on levels. And once again, it's kind of like a different form of Karthus, right? Where you want Misfortune to kind of channel the whole time. So make sure to position her well, so that her cone will hit the most units as possible. Usually this means that putting her in a corner is the best choice. And also make sure that she does not get stunned as much as possible. So her damage is at 5 stars. She does not survive at all. Her survivability is at 1. And she has pretty good utility, because if she aims it correctly, she actually deals damage to the entire enemy team, which means that her utility is at a 3, making her overall, she's alright. She's a B rank unit. Next up, we've got Swain. Swain is a very crazy character where, well, first of all, he is also a triple tribe. He is all of a demon, an imperial, and a shapeshifter all at once. His ability is transform into a spooky crazy bird, where he transforms into this raven demon thing that drains health from all enemies. And at the end of his transformation, he also finishes off with a burst of energy and deals AoE damage to anything around him. Dude, when Swain transforms, he basically takes no damage. It really needs to be really needs to be focused fire down or get hit by a burst spell to die. So the whole point of Swain, like most legendary units, is to make him ulti without dying. Because once he ultimates, it doesn't matter. This one is a little bit more safe compared to, Karthus and Misfortune, because it's not channeled, right? It's a form that kind of lasts until the end, and then even at the end, it kind of explodes and gives you some extra value. So Swain is a very, very powerful character. Very relevant types as well. It's very easy to build Imperial from Swain, and you can also get Demon very easily, and you also can make Shapeshifters very easily. So 3 very relevant tribes, coupled with a very strong ultimate, makes me think that Swain is one of the best legendaries there are. That is an S tier. And finally, we have Yasuo. Who can forget Yasuo? Our, League of Legends counterpart that likes to kind of solo feed or carry the game, right? There is no Yasuo when I remembered League that does okay. Right? Yasuo is always just going to be insane or a feeder. And in this game, it's kind of like that. He's the only exile in the game, and he's also a Blade Master, which is kind of funny because exile means that you have to place him in a spot where there are no allies near him. So you want to place him away from your team for sure, so that he gains his bonus shield. His ability is also tied with Akali for being the lowest mana cost in the game. And Steel Tempest is very simple. He stabs forward, dealing damage to 2 enemies in the line, so deals damage to whatever he's attacking, plus a unit behind him, similar to Mordekaiser's ability. And after he casts it 2 times, the third one will instead launch a whirlwind, which basically travels through the whole map. All right, it travels through the whole map, it stuns them all, and then it effectively acts as kind of like a hard CC. Think of it as kind of like a Aurelius Sol combined with a Sejuani stun. So yeah, Yasuo can get pretty scary really fast, especially if he can build up to his ulti really fast. So that means you want to put items on him. You want to put like attack speed items or mana items to make sure he actually gets to that point. But yeah, overall, he's a very, very strong character. He does really good damage. He has 4 stars in that. He's really good at survival because he gains the shield himself, so that's a 4 stars. And he's also a very good utility unit, coming in at also a 4 stars because he deals the tornado attack at the 3rd strike, and it usually goes off unless you position your Yasuo very, very badly. So yeah, Yasuo, very, very strong legendary unit that you pretty much want to include in most team comps. The only reason you don't want to include Yasuo is that he is an exile, so it doesn't count towards your other synergies. But if your synergies are cool, then you should put Yasuo in your team. He's an S tier unit. And there you have it. So the final table for 5 cost units are like this. Not as crazy as the 4 costs, as you can see, but still very, very strong units compared to the 1 cost, 2 cost, and 3 cost units. And finally, here is a whole table of all the units listed in their respective tiers, and this is actually my tier list. So this tier list is accurate as of the end of June, which is kind of where I recorded this video. I guess when you're watching this video now, it should be like early in July. So things change all the time. I'm assuming that this is going to be like League of Legends, where the developer is going to come in and do a lot of balance changes and whatnot. But just so you guys know, auto chess is a genre of game that is self-correcting, right? If a unit is very, very strong, it might get overdrafted. And if the unit gets drafted by too many people, then it's very hard for them to find like 3 of the same kind, because there's only a limited amount of units in a game every round, right? So just know that, if you think the meta is leaning towards a lot of Yasuo, for example, you not only want to avoid Yasuo, but you want to pick units that kind of counter Yasuo. So make sure you do that. However, that is it for the unit analysis video. Holy jeez, if you watched for this long, a big shout out to you for, staying and learning so much knowledge. I'm going to make more TFT videos going forward, and that will be positioning guides, that will be item guides. The item system in this game is very, very cool. We also have like creep rounds and like other tricks and tips for you. So make sure you tune in for that. And also make sure you check out my stream. That's twitch.tv/Amaz. It's very easy to type in. You should follow me there. And I also stream at 6 a.m. Pacific time every weekday now. So yeah, make sure you come in and say hi to me live and, you know, ask me questions. Tell me what you think about TFT and, you know, any unit that you think I have underrated or overrated, or any favorite units you guys might like. Let me know. But for now, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys next time.